It's story time. So let's pretend it's taco night. You have to go to the supermarket and get some tomatoes. Upon exiting the supermarket, sitting outside are Girl Scouts, and they're selling cookies. You love yourself some Thin Mints, peanut butter patties, and Do-si-dos. So you decide to purchase 3 boxes, hand over your $15, and tell the young girls to have a nice day. Purely transactional. Fast forward a month later, it's taco night again. This time, you need peppers. You know the drill. In and out of the supermarket, and to your surprise, Girl Scouts set up again at their table. But this time, they're not selling cookies. Ah man, you'd give anything for some Thin Mints right now. The girls happen to be raising money for their summer trip, and because they have nothing to offer in exchange for your money, conveniently you say you don't have any cash and you'll take a pass. Fast forward a year later, taco night tradition is still going strong. You need tortillas. In and out of the supermarket you go, and what a surprise, Girl Scouts. But again, no cookies. This time around, they're raising money for their local hospital. But today, now, you're willing to give them money. So what's changed between last year and this year? Well, maybe you're a new parent, a new grandparent, a new aunt, a new uncle. Those little Girl Scouts in their cute little uniforms remind you of what your new daughter, granddaughter, or niece could be when she gets older. So you donate money to their cause because now it's relevant to you. You can now relate. You hope that in the future, people will donate to your little Girl Scout the way you just donated to other Girl Scouts. Next, let's talk about cancer for a second. The American Cancer Society is continuously putting on fundraisers to help save people's lives. Someone can send you a GoFundMe request and you might ignore it. You can get a pamphlet in the mail and you might ignore it. Someone might invite you to a blood drive and you might ignore that. Fast forward a few years, and God forbid, your mother, father, uncle, aunt, sister, brother, cousin, grandparent, best friend's kid, you get the point. God forbid they get cancer. All of a sudden, you know everything about cancer. You are continuing to understand what cancer patients go through, physically, mentally, emotionally. It's this whole new world you frankly knew nothing about before. But contrary to the past, now it's relevant to you. It's relevant to your life. You're educating yourself. You're educating others. You're reposting tweets and Instagram and Facebook posts in the support of cancer patients everywhere. Next, let me tell you this story I heard long ago about a white woman. She grew up a bit sheltered but was very open to the world. She eventually met a man, and he happened to be African American, and fell in love with him. They got married and had a child, and everything was right with her world. One day, she gets a call. It's from her husband, who's been stopped by police officers. He tells her to get there quick. She grabs her kid, hops in the car, and arrives to a horrific scene. Her husband, on the ground, beside his car, with a white police officer on top of him, holding his head down to the pavement. Possibly one of the scariest things she's ever seen. You see, this was something in the world she's never encountered: racism. But now it's relevant to her. And now it's relevant to her life. The purpose of these illustrations is to simply highlight how we can all be so focused on our very own lives. We're focused on our own family histories and thinking about what's going to happen for us next. We live in a me culture and an I society. What happens in other lives matters, but not really, because it's not relevant to you at this time. That relevancy, air quotes, is subconscious. It's not something you think about immediately. It's really about familiarity. What are you used to and familiar with in your own bubble of life, familiar with in your typical surroundings? However, familiarity doesn't excuse one's ignorance or lack of education on certain topics. Now, my story isn't close to anything we've seen in the news lately, or even events that haven't been captured or told by the media. However, I want to tell my story because of what we call implicit bias. So, just pulling this information and definition from the Ohio State University's Curran Institute. Implicit bias refers to the attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, affect our actions, and affect our decisions in an unconscious manner, meaning you're not actively thinking about this stuff. So listen up right here. These biases encompass both favorable and unfavorable assessments, and they are activated involuntarily and without an individual's awareness or intentional control. So again, I want to tell my story because I've heard it way too many times before. Well, Trayvon was a thug. Well, Ahmaud was trespassing. Breonna was selling drugs. George was on drugs. When Colin Kaepernick was taking a knee, I had a woman tell me, "Do you know he doesn't even speak to his mother? What kind of son doesn't speak to his mother?" As if whether or not that information was true at the time had anything to do with what Colin was taking a knee for. Often we listen to these things said about people in the media or social media and let our biases immediately sway us. So this story is for the folks who know me and for the folks who are still trying to fully understand, because you didn't know those people, but you know me. We went to grade school, high school, and college together. We've worked together. I've had dinner at your house. I've maybe even slept over. You've attended my wedding. You were on the Zoom call for my baby gender reveal. You know me. You know my behavior. You know my demeanor. You know how I carry myself. You know me. So try to set aside the implicit bias as I tell this story. This event takes place the year before Trayvon Martin was murdered by George Zimmerman. My brother Franz, who many of you may know, and I just finished our junior year of college. A college which at the time was less than 1% black, by the way, and has tried to make its strides for increasing diversity. Hey, just giving credit where credit is due. We decided to meet up with a couple of college friends to have dinner. So sometime after 8 p.m. we arrived to her house in Franz's Ford Hoopty. She lived in a really nice area in Fairfield, New Jersey. We pulled over to the side of the road to let our friends know we were outside across the street. Franz and I stayed in the car. Our friends eventually came out of the house, hopped in their own car, and pulled out of their driveway. Franz and I, however, we were facing the opposite direction, so Franz pulled into the driveway to make a routine K-turn. Right before making his initial turn into the driveway, we noticed a police vehicle was coming up behind us. After Franz successfully completed the turn, we were on our way and started following our friends down the road. However, the police vehicle that was previously coming close to us had made its own U-turn and started following us. Hope you all are still with me. From my perspective, Franz was a bit freaked out. He was like, "Oh man, these guys are going to pull us over." Me being cool and calm like I typically am was just like, "Nah, we didn't do anything. Maybe they just needed to make a U-turn." We followed our friends onto the ramp to the highway and the police vehicle was still following us. Then I added to our conversation, plus he's been following us for quite some time now and he's never turned on the sirens. And Franz was still sure we were about to get pulled over. We're still following our friends on the highway, then all of a sudden, sirens. Alright, cool. Franz pulls over to the side of the highway. The New Jersey Fairfield police officer approaches the driver's side. Surprisingly, another Fairfield police officer approaches the passenger side. As expected, the driver's side officer asked Franz for his license and registration. But then oddly, he asked for my ID as well. Not in the movies, not on TV, and not in real life have I ever seen or ever heard of a passenger being asked for their license or state ID during a routine being the key word here, traffic stop. The officers head back to the patrol car and that's it. No, that's not it. Obviously, they're not going to find anything on us. They return to their vehicle. then that's when ish starts to get a bit uncomfortable, if that's even the right word. The officer on the driver's side proceeds to ask us questions. Do you boys have guns or weapons in this car? Yo, we were like, what the heck? And responded, no. Do you boys have drugs in this car? Again, taken aback, like, what the heck? We responded, no. You know, boys, if we search this car and we find weapons or drugs, you're going to be in really, really big trouble. This, ladies and gentlemen, is why you should know your rights. Franz and I went to both high school and college together, Seton Hall Prep and the University of Scranton, respectively. But yeah, we definitely weren't taught our rights in either of those places. So again, we responded no. The officer then told Franz that his third brake light was dim or out and he should get it fixed. Then he and his partner left, just like that. No real explanation for why we were pulled over, no real explanation for why we were asked those questions. So let me remind you, this was before Trayvon Martin. The next morning, being the curious guy that I am, I was looking for answers. I called the New Jersey Fairfield Police Department. I got someone on the phone. Hello, sir. How can I help you? Good morning, sir. Last night, my friend and I were pulled over by two of your police officers. They never told us why we were really pulled over. However, they asked us a series of questions that didn't seem to be necessary. They asked us if we had guns or weapons in the car. They asked us if we had drugs in the car. We responded no. And he made it seem like he was going to search our car without giving us any reason. I just want to understand what happened here. That's just not normal. Sorry, sir, I believe the officers were just doing their routine job. Oh, well, that doesn't really seem routine to me. Sir, all I can tell you is that they probably had reasons for asking those questions. And that's all I got from the New Jersey Fairfield Police Department. Listen, I personally know officers. I stand with the police and what they're supposed to stand for. I'm a safe driver and probably have been pulled over only 3 times before. Each of those times, my interactions with the officers were great. I don't have any issues with any individual officers, but as a unit, you better stand up for what's right. If I call into your station and discuss something I thought was out of line, you may play it down to me to save face, but if you don't record that call or bring it to another's attention, you just happen to be part of the problem. As I'm older now, it seems like the worst part of that encounter was actually telling my dad, and my dad responding, well, good thing you cooperated because they could have killed you. Damn, that's my reality, huh? Because of the color of my skin, at any moment in time, anyone's implicit bias or intentional bias could have me in cuffs or worse yet, dead. And the worst part of everything, for me personally, is my brother and sister having to sometime in the future explain to my 6, 5, 4, and 2-year-old nephews that people might treat them differently because of the color of their skin. That's my reality. I was just a kid in Rite Aid with my mom on Sunday in the toy section playing with the baseball, just playing pretend baseball, stuff kids do. I leave the baseball in the toy section and then I leave the aisle. Security guard stops me and says, the manager saw you trying to steal that ball. Man, I bursted out into tears. I've entered stores where the store owner or employee had their eyes fixated on me the minute I walked in. I've attended a university where in my junior year an associate professor tried to single me out as a bad apple for absolutely no reason. Everyone involved suspected it was definitely racial. That's my reality. And you actually know me. I've received a few messages about people asking me what can they do, and my response is just racism, bigotry, discrimination is woven into the fabric of our society. The best thing for any and everyone to do is to be aware. It's to be awake. And you do that by educating yourself, not just about the things that are relevant to you. For example, there's a gender pay gap. Just because you're a man doesn't mean it's not relevant. Discrimination continues to impact the health of the LGBTQT community. Just because you're not gay doesn't mean it's not relevant. Humans are being trafficked, and modern day slavery lives within our own borders today. Just because you don't know anyone who has been trafficked doesn't mean it's not relevant. People of color being harassed, formerly stopped and frisked in New York City, shot to death or killed due to police brutality or by crazy ass citizens is ridiculous. And just because you're not a person of color doesn't mean it's not relevant. And finally, just because you're ignorant or blind to the situations I just listed and the many more out there in the world does not mean they do not exist. Try to put yourself in someone else's shoes for once, and don't just try them on. Go for a walk. I want to sum this up with a reaction to Drew Brees' Yahoo interview the other day. I know NFL players are already slamming the guy. I myself am just wondering if he's going to be canceled like Wendy's is. The video of Drew Brees started off strong. I'm a man of faith, so I vibe with that. We're all created equal, and we all do have a responsibility to love, care, and respect each other. And as the video goes on, yeah, man, keep preaching. We accomplish more things as a society and a community when we do it together. Then, about a third of the way in, he says, I think we all recognize the changes that need to take place. And I'm like, hold up. That's a really blanket statement, Drew. There's definitely no we all. And I agree with his next statement. Yes, we need to provide opportunities for each other to help move the world forward. And then 2/3 of the way in, Drew Brees gets canceled. What Drew Brees envisions when he stands up for the national anthem is his two grandfathers who fought for this country during World War II. They fought to make the world a better place. So every time he looks at the flag and sings the national anthem, he thinks about who? His grandfathers, making what he's saying, word of the day, relevant to him and his situation. Relevancy. See, when Drew stands with his hand over his heart for the national anthem and he gets emotional, he needs to understand that he's not standing for freedom. He's standing for his grandfathers. He stands because he respects that his grandfathers fought for freedom to make this country and this world a better place. However, Drew, the freedom they fought for, that freedom isn't equally distributed or recognized across our country. So the question for Drew is, did your grandfathers fight for a select majority's freedom, or did they fight for everyone's freedom? Because if your grandfathers are anything like the Christian, well-spoken leader you are today, and if your grandfathers indeed did fight for everyone's freedom, then you're actually dishonoring them with the remarks of, I will never agree with anyone disrespecting the flag. Because that flag is supposed to represent a freedom that your grandfathers put their lives on the line for, a freedom that doesn't exist for everyone today. So next time, Drew Brees, when you stand in a stadium and the anthem is about to be played, take a look around, man. Look at everyone standing. Remember that everyone thinks they're standing for what your grandfathers fought for. But you now remember that what your grandfathers put their lives on the line for doesn't fully exist across the board today. And you tell me, Drew, if that's what they wanted, if that's what they died for. So my friends, I leave you with these quotes. Many of you may be familiar with what we think Gandhi said, which is be the change you wish to see in the world. A paraphrased version of what he actually said was, if we could change ourselves, the tendencies in the world would also change. As a man changes his own nature, so does the attitude of the world change towards him. We need not wait to see what others do. Legendary basketball coach John Wooden said, it's not who's right, it's about what's right. And in the words of Martin Luther King Jr., the time is always right to do what is right. And in the words of Margaret Mead, Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. If you got to the end of this, thank you for listening. Hopefully, for the people who are asking me questions, this sheds some more light on your journey to fully understanding. This isn't a fad, this isn't a phase, this is reality. I hope you continue to be aware, to be awake, and to keep learning. Oh. And the very last thing I want to say as a side note to conclude my recommendations of people educating themselves, I hear it way too often. Well, when the rioting and looting stops, then we can have a conversation. In many cities, rioters and looters have just taken advantage of these protests, and some of these riots and lootings have been strategically planned out. In many areas, protesters are not, I repeat, are not the ones rioting and looting. I know for many of you right now, your mind was probably just blown. K Money Time. I'm out.